All right, welcome back. So for the last operation for exercise number 4, we're going to create an operation called high-speed surface waterline. So a waterline operation is really used whenever you have machining operations that need to take place at an angle, usually between 30 and 90 degree angles. That's where you would use waterline. For example, this pocket right here to this radius over here, that's all on an angle. So you can actually choose what area you want to machine depending on that angle, but they have to be between 30 and 90 degrees, which we do have in this little pocket. And I'll go ahead and get started so I can show you what I mean. So first, we need to create the stock, just like we've created in our previous two between each operation. So let's go ahead and do that. So toolpath, stock model, and we will call this stock after surfaces, or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really, or we can kind of call it stocks after spiral maybe. This way you'd remember it's right after you created your spiral operation. So stock, post, spiral. And you want to come over here, make sure stock setup is selected. Under source operations, you want to make sure you select all of your operations by selecting one and then holding shift and selecting the last one. And go ahead and select OK. And give MasterCam a little bit of time to generate that stock for you. Just because that window went away does not mean it's done. That symbol right here means it's still generating your stock. All right, so when your stock is finished, you'll see it in front of you right here. Just make sure you hold Alt and hit T if you want to go back and forth between your stock that you just created and your current model that you've designed, the surfaces that you've designed, okay? So for our part, I believe I just clicked on the verify on accident. I'm going to exit out of that. Go ahead and go back to this view, and let's go ahead and copy our spiral operation. So right click on that and move it down over here and then let go. Right click on the surface high speed spiral and then copy after. Once you're done with that, come over here and just right now, before you get started even, click on verify over here and make sure you select the stock post spiral for it. So this way when we run this machining operation, we don't need to select the rest of them as well. And also, as a precaution, I always like to make sure that my arrow is at the end by moving it down, okay? So now go to your parameters for the surface high speed, and we want to change the spiral obviously to waterline. It's still a finishing operation, and let's go to tool. For the tool, we're going to make sure it's still a 1/4 inch ball end mill, and we will just change the name to waterline. All right, so go ahead and go to cut parameters. You want to make sure optimize is selected. MasterCam basically calculates and optimizes the best tool path to take. Now for step down, let's go ahead and make the step down a lot smaller than that, 0.01, okay? And we want to make sure to add some cuts as well. All right, so these have a ratio, so if you actually change this to 0.015, this will be changed as well. But let's go ahead and change it to 0.01, okay? And for the minimum profile step down, let's go ahead and change that to 0.050. And percent step over 800 to 1000 is good. Just make sure that your walls, there's nothing on the walls, and corner rounding is off. We're not doing anything with radiuses around here. Now go to tool containment. You want to make sure that outside is selected. Might be default for the center, but make sure outside is selected. Make sure you add 0.05, but this time make sure to add offset distance to tool radius. And that's going to be useful when the tool is machining the outside over here. Because remember, we're containing that tool using that geometry, that big circle geometry. So if we contain it this way, then the tool is not going to be able to machine the surface right here. But if we add 0.05 to the tool radius, it's going to come out much more and able to machine the outside of my part, okay? So go to transition. For transition, make sure tangential is selected and the angle over here is at 30 degrees. Okay, for steep, shallow, now I usually like to use detect limits, but for this one, if I actually just run it, it will run to the 0. But remember, I'm using the ball end mill. That means it's going to leave a radius at the bottom. I'm actually going to leave it this way for you just so I can show you what happens if you do that, okay? And angles is from 0 to 30. You want to probably change that to 30 degrees to 90, okay? And linking parameters, we can keep everything the same as the previous operation, and select apply. And real quick, the steep, shallow, the reason I changed this to 30 is because that's where it best works with for angles between 30 and 90 degrees, okay? Now, we might have to come back and change these depending on what our part machines after we create it. Now, after we're done with that, link and parameters, like I said, everything looks good. Select apply and OK. Now let's go ahead and verify the machining operation in MASTERCAM simulation. All right, now it opened it up. There it is. And let's go ahead and play it out and see what happens. So there's my machining operation taking place, going all around my part. Now, one very important aspect that I see from right here is that this tool will actually not work for this operation. My machining distance on that tool is probably looks like it's about an inch, maybe a half an inch. While my part is good 1.5 inches deep, this tool will not work. So you would have to go back in and change that tool for sure. Okay, so some important aspects that we see over here that we need to change is coming over here. You're going to notice that there's a radius left, and remember that's why I told you for the leaving it to detect its own z-axis. It will detect it, but it doesn't know that you're using a ball end mill, so you need to come over and compensate for that by changing some features. So come over here, exit out real quick, go to parameters, go to steep and shallow, and now let's go ahead and add about 100 thou to the end. So it's still going to be negative, but it's going to be negative 0.100. Okay, so this will allow the tool to dive in more. So go ahead and select apply. There's still something that I need to fix, but as well, but I want to show you step by step how to fix things in MASTERCAM and simulation. So you need to verify after every time you change even one feature, so you don't mess up and have multiple things that you need to change. So always change one thing and then go back and see what happens after you change that. So go ahead and select. I'm going to actually forward it just so I can see the end results of it. All right, and you can see now it clears the bottom. So now I compensated all the way to the bottom and it cleared it. But the only issue now is this right here. So I need to figure out what is causing my tool to miss this angle right here, and it probably more than likely has to do with the angles, but I'm gonna have to go back and figure that out. So let's go ahead and exit out of here and try to figure this out. All right, so come over here under parameters and under steep and shallow. Now we've defined that we need to MASTERCAM to machine between 30 and 90 degrees, and I was wrong with this, so we need to change this to 0. All right, so these are the angles that you allow MASTERCAM to machine in between. And I'm gonna allow it, like I said, from bring it back to 0, so MASTERCAM can detect that surface. Otherwise, that's the issue here, is that MASTERCAM can detect it because a little bit of that surface actually is less than 30 degrees, and that's why MASTERCAM will not see it to machine it. So keeping it between 0 and 90 should detect all the surfaces for me. So go ahead and select apply and verify the operation. And this should actually machine the rest of my part for me if I'm correct. So I will forward the part real quick for you. Okay, and there you go. Everything looks good. So there's your finished part. Everything on the outside is machined really nice and smooth. Now, obviously, you can actually go back in because some of my pockets, as I see, they're not the smoothest finished. So that's something you can go back in and play around with the values and the step overs, especially to machine a very flat surface at the bottom over here. Or you can even, for the pocket wise, go first in with an end mill before going back in with a ball end mill to machine the corners of the part. But there you go, all finished. This concludes exercise number 4.